Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councilmember John Erickson. It's so great to be here with you all today to discuss a topic that's really important to me and near and dear to so many members in our community's hearts. I'm really excited to be discussing the new Netflix film Pray Away with some pretty incredible individuals. I'm so excited to bring on Christine Stolakis, who is the director and producer of this amazing film. And I'm so excited to bring on Julie Rogers, who, outside of writing an amazing book, in the film, discussing all this and really dealing with the issues of spirituality, sexuality, and religion, and what it can be used for, and what it we've seen it be used for, and how we can work together as a community to ensure that we use religion in a positive way for uplifting our voices. Why don't you come on the virtual screen, Julie and Christine?
Hi, John.
Awesome. It's so good to be here with you both. Thank you for zooming in from the East Coast with us. I'm so excited that you're here with us today.
It's so
Thank
great to be
you.
here.
Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for having us. I'm
One
very much looking forward to this conversation.
It is a conversation I seem to be having all over the time. I didn't choose to go into academia, but here we are, and we're going to be talking about this nevertheless. But I'm going to kick us off. I want to really get to the heart of the issue and make sure that we all have time enough for questions. But Christine, I want to start with you. Why this topic? Why this film? What is your story? As we all have the story with this, why now?
Yes, so I got to this topic because my uncle went through conversion therapy when he came out as trans as a child. And he went through hell. He suffered from a lot of the mental health challenges that folks who go through this suffer from. He had depression, anxiety, suicidal ideations. He had challenges with alcoholism, drug addiction, obsessive compulsive disorder, like a whole host of things, all following his time in conversion therapy, which in his case was with a licensed therapist. He went to conversion therapy in an era where every therapist was a conversion therapist. This is like in the 60s and early 70s. And he had a really hard life, and he actually passed away right before I went to film school. And I decided in the wake of his passing that I wanted to make my first film about the conversion therapy movement. And just to say, my uncle was also raised Catholic, as was I. So even when he wasn't in conversion therapy, sitting down across the seat from a licensed practitioner, he was really also existing within the religious belief system that to be trans in his case was a sin and a sickness. So anyway, I went to film school. I was very resolved that I wanted to make my first feature about this movement. And I started to do research. And I found out what is the central piece of information that gets really shared and analyzed in the film, which is that the vast majority of conversion therapy organizations are run by LGBTQ folks themselves who claim that they have changed. And knowing that that was how the system worked, that this is really a system of hurt people hurting other people, of internalized homophobia and transphobia wielded outward, that was a huge light bulb for me in terms of my uncle's suffering, because he spent his entire life trying to change and believing that change was possible to the complete detriment of his mental health. So that's how I got to the topic. And the majority of the voices in the film are of past and present leaders, and a number of leaders who have since come out as gay and are now fighting to stop the very movement they helped grow. And then we also weaved in the story of someone who primarily experienced this movement as a participant, as a survivor, and that person is with me today, Julie Rogers. So that was the genesis of the film, and yeah, that all turned into Pray Away.
So, Julie, I want to get to you. And first of all, to all of our amazing people that are tuning in, go out and buy Julie's book. It's Out Love, a queer Christian survival story. It's great. I bought it, so it's coming to me. But if you're really fascinated in this topic, please go out there and read it. And I also wanted to hold space, Christine, for your uncle. And thank you for sharing their story and uplifting that, and remind all of those individuals that are tuning in that resources are available, that if you are experiencing anything like this, from the Trevor Project, if you live here in Los Angeles, the LA LGBT Center, or call me myself at City Hall. I'll make sure you get connected to the right services. But Julie, tell me more about you. You're fabulous. I know that in general from reading and seeing your story, but what really involved you was saying yes to Christine being featured in the film, and what's happened since?
I was so surprised when I found myself saying yes to Christine to be in this film. I've had a lot of people. So I was in conversion therapy myself for almost a decade. My mom took me to meet with a man named Ricky Chalette, who's the executive director of Living Hope Ministries in Arlington, Texas. And Living Hope is still going today, by the way. And I was 16. I really wanted to be good. I was in an intensely conservative evangelical community in Texas. And that was the only path for me to be good and to belong. And so I found myself over the years sort of being groomed for leadership in those spaces. And then graduating college, starting to like make sense of the world and be like, hey, this is not only problematic and wrong, it's also extremely damaging. And I'm not well. My friends that have been through this program with me are reeling, and we all had such mental health crises that was coming out in such harmful ways. And so I ended up sort of like helping end Exodus and sort of, transition into other spaces of what it looked like for me to thrive as an LGBTQ person. But anyway, a few years later, Christine reaches out, and I just felt like, first I was like, I think this is probably just going to end up on like Vimeo. I didn't really realize it was going to be seen by like millions and millions of people. And here we are. But I was like, I really trust this person. I could tell Christine had a lot of integrity and had done so much research and was connected to so many sort of important figures and was asking the right questions. And I just trusted that she would do her very best to tell my story accurately. And I was like, if I end up looking bad in it, it's probably because I have not I'm a complicated person and I've had a complicated journey. And I feel like I found somebody who's going to tell the truth with integrity about this whole movement. And I'm up for just like letting her tell the truth about me as she sees it through this process done with a lot of trust and integrity. So yeah, here we are.
Here you are. I mean, and what a story you have and share. And I want to thank you for being brave, because so many people benefit from your story. The millions and millions of people that you're like, oh no, they're gonna hear my story, but they're gonna hear your story and hopefully get the resources that they need to deal with a serious issue that is still legal in a lot of states, and as you said, Julie, going on. And this is a friendly reminder to everyone to get engaged, because President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris promised an end to conversion therapy on the campaign trail. So if you have a senator, a local congressperson, now's a great time to call them and tell them to ban this practice federally, nationwide. Here in California, it is banned, but that still means that we have a lot of work to do, because there are people that are dealing with these issues. So,
and John, can I just add one little thing to that? Because if you're calling your congressperson, if I can add like 2 lines that I'd love you to share with your congressperson, it's that not only do we need bans, but if your congressperson is involved with a religious organization, church they go to every Sunday with their family, etc., that is also a place we need to talk about ending this practice, because we know that the majority of conversion therapy actually happens within religious organizations where those bans can't touch the practice. And the bans are crucial. We need the bans, and it's stopping this harmful practice from affecting so many people. And we need a hearts and mind shift as well, because of robust religious freedom protections in our country. Those bans don't stop practitioners like the one that put Julie through conversion therapy. If it happens within a religious ministry, those get to continue under religious freedom protection. So we need the bans, and we need a culture shift to see this as an issue we can all agree on is abuse, is hurting kids, is hurting families, causes suicide. So I just want to throw that out there because it's just an important thing.
It's the horror of horrors, right? I mean, you go through this, you are more susceptible to, as you said, Christine, alcoholism, drug and
Yes.
addiction, and social stigma and issues, as well as not and having to grapple with the fact that people are telling you that you're not beautiful the way that you are and that you're born that way, right? So many of us in the LGBTQ community struggle with saying, I love myself and I love the world just as I am. And that's why you sharing your story, Julie, is so critical, because we all have different reactions to conservative religions. Before this Zoom panel thing, I was sharing that, I got my PhD in this very actual topic because I was always very fascinated growing up with people telling me I was going to go to hell. So I decided to get a PhD in it. But I had a reaction that was like, no, I don't believe in what they're telling me because I know who I am. But everyone has a different reaction to this. Julie, in terms of your reaction to, when people would tell you that you are different and that you're not worthy of God's love, or that you weren't worthy in general, what was your reaction? And, how, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit of your story with those that might have not watched the film yet.
I think, I was one of those kids that just wanted so desperately to be good. And I really, really, to be good in my communities, there was such like an authoritarian sort of like structure in a lot of these conservative religious communities. And that really meant I needed to find approval with the leaders in my community, because to me, they represented God. And so it was all really connected to my need for a sense of identity and my need for a sense of community and belonging. When my mom would say like, oh, look at those dykes, they're so disgusting. And, look at them all wearing sweater vests. That's how they signal to each other that they're gay. And I was like, oh man, don't wear sweater vests. Like, I don't want to be disgusting. And it's just this really kid way of sort of internalizing, I don't want to be disgusting. I don't want to be an embarrassment to people who love me. And so to me, it really was just a matter of survival, of being willing to do literally anything they told me that I needed to do in order to find approval among them, and then also sort of in a cosmic way to God, because I just associated them with God. And so it ended up leading to a lot of self-harm, and as you see in the documentary, and a lot of sort of fragmentation between like my mind and body and heart and feelings, and hatred of my body, and just all these things that we see happening in so many people in the queer community. And it's taken a lot of work, a lot of therapy, to begin to really live an integrated life, and to be able to show up sort of as my full self in healthy relationships has been a long journey.
Yeah, and it is a journey. And I think the thing that we realize about this harmful practice is that what you just shared, everyone has to go through that journey. And, for some of us, we might not survive that journey. I'm so thankful, I'm sure so many of us watching, that we have those communities of people that will always tell us they love us and that we are beautiful just the way that we are. But Christine, Julie's story is enough for any movie, right? I want to watch the Julie Rogers story, so that's the sequel. Just letting you know, and Netflix, if you're watching, let's make it happen. But Christine, what stories did you not include, or that you couldn't include? I mean, there are so many, but do any come to mind?
So we know that nearly 700,000 people in the US alone have gone through this. So you could tell 700,000 stories in the United States alone about what it means to go through this. And something I've really felt in the release of this film is those stories need to be told. Pray Away is one film. I am so proud of our film. And we need to be telling stories about this left, right, and center, because it's a complex movement. It's going to be complex to stop it. We can, but there's a lot we need to unpack about it. And there's also a lot of healing that needs to happen. That's something I thought a lot about in the wake of the release. And I'm so excited for Pray Away to be the beginning of a conversation. We're one of the first big documentaries that's really gotten out there that's covered this issue in a number of decades in the way that we have. But I really, really hope that Pray Away also encourages a bunch of other films to get told. So, I mean, I could answer your question with thousands of stories that I've heard in one way or another, that I wish that I could include. Maybe one thing I'll say specifically, just because it comes from my own experience with my family, is most therapists no longer practice any form of conversion therapy, most licensed therapists, thank God. And there are some that still do. There is an organization called the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice that continues into today. It's a rebranded organization from one that used to exist called NARTH. They are, using different language to lend credibility to the ex-LGBTQ world from the point of view of therapy, of research papers that look official, that if you poke at them are not official at all. This is a problem that we really need to address, that there's anyone with, any certificate that's on their wall that says that this is okay. And I just lived the damaging message of that. My uncle passed away and I went with my family to clean out where he was living. I found a stack of brochures from licensed therapists, from an organization that he subscribed to following his entire life, that just told him about how sick he was over and over and over and over again. And it's just so damaging. So I guess I mentioned that because Pray Away really does situate itself in the world of religion, which again really is where the vast majority of conversion therapy happens, with a pastor acting as a pseudo counselor in a group, in a session that, or pardon me, in a Bible study that looks like a group therapy session, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also therapists who are pushing this forward, and that's got to end yesterday. And yeah, I've lived the damage of that.
It's important to say these names of these organizations that are out there, right? Because as we see with a lot of harmful business practices, when we call out one like Exodus International, and we saw what happened to them in the film, they refold, they get a brand new organization, and then it's like, the Puppies and Kittens organization of the United States, right? And they bring in people because, and there is deception in marketing and deception in practices. And we all know that there are the clinical standards and practices that we've worked to eliminate this harmful practice but there are those people that do put out harmful facts. It reminds me a lot about the anti-vaccine movement. It looks really official, but it's not. And that's your friendly reminder to get vaccinated and or boosted in this conversation. I say it too many times a day. But Julie, could you maybe bring us in centrally to when you worked with a counselor, these groups you worked with? What were the types of things that they would tell you to make you, when you were at that time in your life that like this was okay, but inside you're like, oh, I got to get out of here?
So the first thing I want to say is that everything I'm going to tell you is happening today. I hear from people who are going to these exact same meetings. So it's just so important to keep in mind that I hear from like teenagers that are currently in this. At Living Hope, which is similar to, I think, many other programs around the country, I did weekly pastoral counseling meetings with Ricky Chalette, which were basically therapy sessions, except he had absolutely no therapeutic training. And so he would just apply a lot of the like widely discredited, sort of reparative therapy ideas into our session, where we're looking at my childhood wounds, trying to figure out if it was, my same-sex attractions were the result of a flawed relationship with my mother, or kind of digging in to find out why I was gay so that we could sort of like work to heal that. And then on Thursday nights, we would go to a support group where it was basically like youth group, church meets AA type meetings. And so the first part, it would be about 100 of us, 110 of all ages, all genders, singing songs and listening to Ricky preach a message from the Bible. And then we would split up into small groups. There would be the young men's group, a youth group, women were all together, older men, and then friends and family. And that was sort of where it would be like group therapy, where we would confess if we had reached out to an ex that week, or if we had looked at porn, or sort of if we had hooked up with somebody. And we would go back and forth with a leader that, again, had no therapeutic training, and they would sort of help us figure out why we had done that and what we needed to do the next week to not masturbate or whatever natural thing that we had been doing because we were teenagers. And it was all sort of woven together with Bible verses. And what was wild was it was also like, you know, we were all in communities, like nobody goes to conversion therapy unless their community completely rejects them. Nobody would go if there were any people in their lives that were like, we love you, we delight in you, we think you are so beautiful exactly the way you are. So we were obviously coming from such anti-LGBTQ spaces that when we were there, we felt among our peers a sense of belonging because it was the only place where we were around other queer people who understood what it was like to feel so alienated and alone in their families and their homes and their churches and their schools. And so there was, I think many of us kept going because it was like just the tiniest bit of breadcrumbs for starving people. And we would put up with all of those like wild theories that they threw at us and all the sense of shame that they're, you know, demanding like these confessions. You know, we would deal with all of that just to sort of feel like we weren't alone.
You know, you brought up a couple of, well, you said a lot of great stuff, but you mentioned how this issue isn't just about whether you're gay or straight or trans or bi. This also leads into purity culture. This leads into anti-woman commentary, anti-abortion commentary. Shout out that abortion is a safe legal practice that is federally available still before the Supreme Court strikes it down. I hope not, but you know, it's also linked to so many of those things that while it's telling you to be a man, to be a woman, it upholds traditional, you know, patriarchal normative culture at the same time. I mean, when you said when you masturbated or you had sex, it tells you not to love or self-love yourself. I mean, you know, Christine, I mean, how did you resist the urge to have a whole other subplot about the anti-woman narrative that says you have to be a wife and a mother and all of these things, or to men like that may be a little femme. Yes, I paint my nails, right? But, you know, if I were to do that and be going to these groups right now, I would probably have a different conversation. But Christine, how did you battle all these existing narratives and topics that Julie brings up?
Oh, I mean, it's the worst part of being a director is that you leave so much good stuff on the cutting room floor and so many ideas and storyline. I mean, 90 minutes is an insane amount of time to try to cram in all the things we wish we could have crammed in into Pray Away. And your question resonates with me so deeply, and I could talk about it for days. Very quickly, what I think I'll say is, when I started my research, I thought in the ex-LGBTQ world, what I came to understand was the ex-LGBTQ world and the conversion therapy world, that I would find like an obsession about talking about sex. But I actually think the biggest obsession is talking about gender and policing gender and defining gender in these very patriarchal terms. I could really talk about those sets of observations for days. Something we tried to show in Pray Away is that a treatment, so to speak, is often policing gender and enforcing gender norms. And it sounds so hokey and crazy to think about someone saying, just play more baseball, you'll become a straight man. But you know, it's also quite sinister to say, a story's ringing in my head that I'm deciding on whether or not I want to share, but I've heard men be encouraged to be the most stereotypical man in ways that goes far beyond baseball, in terms of how they treat women sexually, how they regard them, how they are encouraged to objectify them. I mean, it's screwed up stuff. So we did weave that into the narrative of Pray Away, and I think that's why you're seeing in conservative and Christian culture in our country and world a very anti-trans sentiment that is so pervasive. It seems it's overwhelming how pervasive it's become. I think it's a manifestation of this obsession with enforcing gender norms that really is based on something that I would love to leave behind, and I think it makes everyone worse off.
Julie, do you want to say anything about that anymore?
I mean, yeah, I was just going to say, like, all the way, exactly what Christine's saying. In addition to like, okay, yeah, don't like masturbate or have sex or like cuddle with somebody that you have a crush on. they like at the Living Hope youth retreats we went to, they would bring out a Mary Kay lady to teach all the girls, like in a session, like how to wear makeup, and all the guys would go play football. And like Ricky like encouraged me to quit softball so I wouldn't become gay. Like it was just very there was very strict gender norms that definitely made us all feel like it was just pathologized the way that we are. And I was also going to say, Ricky has this like talk, like his main sort of keynote that he's given for like decades. And it starts with the premise that men were created to speak truth into chaos and give it form. And the chaos was women.
I think it's the other way around, personally, being gay and dealing with men myself. They might be dealing with more chaos themselves than anything, but shout out to everyone, they are loved. I mean, you know, you bring something up, Christine, that really is, I think, so important that we're talking about. It's that the shift has gone away from attacking the L, the G, and the B, but we're attacking the T in our gender non-binary communities because
Absolutely.
they're most at risk for
Absolutely.
so many things. Our Black trans community being murdered in numbers every year that go up, and we need them to come down. But for these issues, we see the right or more conservative individuals going at these topics because kids experience gender before sexuality, you know, and when we look at how we tell men to man up or women to wear dresses or all these other things. I mean, heck, if softball made you gay, we'd have a lot more softball players. But let's be real here, you know, and ultimately it also promotes violence, cultures of violence, self-violence, but actual physical violence. Because if men are told the only way they can, you know, be normal is, or to be a man is to dominate in whatever way that is women, and the women are supposed to take it, then we set up these horribly unhealthy sexual futures for so many of us. I mean, did you have to deal with, and maybe you feel comfortable sharing it, but what was the role of violence and self-harm? And a trigger warning to everyone watching, because, you know, I'm very lucky enough, I've never considered those things myself personally, but it is something that we have to grapple with. But Christine or Julie, I would love to talk to you a little bit about, and if you feel comfortable, what is this violence that we see, or the push that we have for ourselves, or the violence that we see externally when it comes to these issues? Or Julie or Christine, whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I can start us off. I mean, so to state just a few things plainly, and John, everything you're saying is just rich and great that we're talking about it, and also so sad that we have to talk about it, but it's so real. So we know that for people who go through youth who go through conversion therapy, they are more than twice as likely to have attempted suicide. And that's a conservative estimate, I just want to say. We know that suicide and self-harm are a very real and devastating part of this movement. And I think when you look at the movement and learn a lot about the movement, the internalization of self-hatred is such a huge part of what this movement does to folks. And that is traumatizing in and of itself, that internalization. And you can understand why a part of this world then is self-harm, because you take that hate out on yourself. And that's one of the parts of the movement I really wanted Pray Away to show, is that conversion therapy, it's a world. It's so much more than just, you know, Julie sitting down once a week with Ricky, which in and of itself is something that I know was horrible, but it sticks with you in your most intimate of moments when you're alone. You might learn that this is that you have to weave all this into how you pray. It's a part of every time you feel an attraction towards anyone, someone that you see on a TV show. It just becomes a whole part of your world, so you can understand why devastatingly people take stuff out on themselves physically, mentally, and then, you know, devastatingly people take their own lives. So it is just a part of this. It is a part of it we have to face. And my most sincere hope is that people who watch Pray Away really don't reduce this to, well, this is an anti-religion, yada, yada, whatever conversation. No way. We're talking about ending abuse, ending spiritual abuse, ending psychological abuse, and kind of getting rid of this culture that creates a world where self-harm feels like the only way to let some of the energy out for some folks. So yeah, I mean, it's just such a real part of this world. Yeah, I could go on and on. And again, I can't cite the Trevor Project enough as a resource for folks who might be in this world right now, who are dealing with some of these things. I also would like to cite the National Center for Lesbian Rights Born Perfect campaign. They have a legal helpline if you are in a program like this and are looking for some kind of legal support. They also are incredible. So there are lifelines out there for you mentally, spiritually, legally. There's a whole world in which being a Christian and being LGBTQ is something that's amazing and can be a mutually enriching part of your life. There are churches that are like willing and ready to accept you exactly as you are as an LGBTQ person. So anyway, I'm going on and on to kind of talk to some of the antidotes to the self-harm and self-hatred that you point to, but oh my gosh, it's a real part of this world. Absolutely.
Yeah. Julie, do you want to add on?
I mean, yeah, everything that Christine said, like to share a little personal, part of this in my own life. When I came out at 16, my brother he's about 8 years older. And he sat me down and he was like, I just really hope you don't choose to be gay because I want you to be able to come around my kids as they get older. And, from the time I came out onward, every time I was in a meeting, I was like, am I sitting gay right now? When I'm around kids, I'm like, are they afraid I'm going to abuse them? When I went to hug friends, it was like, do they think I'm disgusting? I need to not hold on too long, and it's just that sort of like constant hyper vigilant awareness of having to police yourself because you feel like you're being watched and judged, because you are in many ways. It does. There's no way to respond to it other than something that harms your body. And so I did struggle. I talk a lot about it in my book, and in the movie. I did struggle with self-harm and eating disorders. And it was something that pretty much everybody in conversion therapy alongside of me were struggling with as well. And even then, we didn't make a connection at that time to the system we were in. We just thought we were like bad and not doing good enough. And that's why we were acting out in those ways. And it's so sad. And I am really glad, Christina, you highlighted that there are so many communities, whether you're Catholic, whether you're evangelical, whether you're not religious at all, but in just a conservative cultural community. There are all kinds of people who are very similar to the people that you know and love, who will just enthusiastically embrace you. It just sometimes takes a little courage to keep holding on while you're still in those spaces and haven't found that loving community yet.
So let's talk about those spaces, because those spaces are beautiful. And when we all find those spaces, we love them. We love them, and this is something that we saw occur, and the type of stigma. And thank you, Julie, for sharing your story about, your experience with violence and your friends that went through this. But we saw the same conversation around the HIV/AIDS pandemic, which is still there. Even though we have COVID everywhere, we still are dealing with HIV and AIDS, which, we're working hard to defeat in every way. But people wouldn't let their kids around them not because they were gay, but they were afraid that they were going to give them, HIV, which we all know is obscene, and not scientifically possible. But what we really see here is how people form their own communities. And that is actually the topic of my dissertation itself. But, it's about finding chosen communities. We have things like the Metropolitan Community Church. We had Dignity USA and all those groups that were founded as a way to say, no, actually, God does love you, or whatever version of religion loves you. And you don't have to be religious. You don't have to be agnostic. My favorite quote from my whole dissertation is Bishop Gene Robertson, the Anglican Church's first openly gay bishop way back when, when I was asking him about why there was a disconnect between religion and the LGBTQ community, even though there's a lot of religion in both, right? We don't like to say that. He said, well, gay people are religious. They, just instead of going to church on a Sunday, they go to brunch. And instead of drinking the blood of Christ, they're drinking a Bloody Mary. So, when we think about religious communities that we search out to, they are there. Julie, Christine, tell me more about those communities. Where are they? Where did you find them? Let's make sure that we're uplifting those voices. So when people are searching for places to feel loved, they can watch this and find them?
So I would say the places that I found them are organizations like there's an organization called the QCF, the Queer Christian such and such. Just like Google that in queer and you'll find it. And through that you find like billions of churches and local organizations that you can connect to, and like all these friends. And if you go to the Trevor Project, you can see all these like local organizations, like starting to find local people. And then, from there you meet more people. And then before long, you have this, like, your social media feed is exclusively queer, and just everybody has like beards and high heels on, and it's amazing. You just kind of have to start finding those people, those inroads at the beginning.
Christine, let's shout out those communities.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let me just point out, in the film and Pray Away, we spend time in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Such an incredible community that fully accepts and fights for the rights of LGBTQ folks in the most real ways, and are just like filled, and it's just also just filled with the most lovely people. There are places like that around the country, and Julie's mentioned some of the ways that you can find them. I think the only thing I'd like to add is that when you're in the world of the ex-LGBTQ movement, you are often told that those places do not exist, and that is not true. There is absolutely life on the other side of that world. If you are listening to this, where you can be a Christian person, a person of faith, however you want to define yourself, if part of your religious or spiritual experience is having some kind of relationship with God, or what you may call God, you can find a community that is ready to love you exactly as you are. But unfortunately, a lie gets told in the ex-LGBTQ world, which is that that's not possible, but that's not true at all.
It's so important that we all find community within each other too. Just because it might be you and your best friend struggling through this doesn't mean that's not a community. So many great organizations and communities have been founded because a group of people get together and they say no, and they say we need to figure this out, right? I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to some questions. And remember, to everyone watching, if you have a question, you can email arts@weho.org, and we're going to get them in. We got a couple. But Christine, with this film, what's next? Julie, what's next? Where we want this to go? Oscars. Where do we want to take this film on the road? What can we expect next?
Talk a little bit about that. So first of all, one of the most important things you can do if you're watching this is just share the news of this film existing. This is a topic where we have to change hearts and minds. We have to have kind of a national, international, and global agreement that the ex-LGBTQ movement, despite any good intentions of anyone involved, is causing pain and trauma. That just has to be common knowledge. We have to make it common knowledge that this continues today. This is not something of the past. And that's something that is really made clear in the film. And I have seen misunderstandings about conversion therapy in the ex-LGBTQ movement from all people, progressives included, who often think this is a thing of the past. So just first things first, it sounds small, but it's big. If you haven't seen the film, take a peek. If you don't want to watch the film because maybe it hits a little too close to home, also great. Is there someone in your community you might want to share it with and say, hey, this touches on something I went through. Will you watch this for me? Can we have a dialogue about this afterwards? Or can you then take this to your church and have a dialogue about it in your church? And then beyond, and just to say, thank you, Netflix, for helping me be able to say that at all. They've been an incredible partner in making sure that this film is widely available around the globe. It's a dream for me that started as an independent project. It really did start out of love and grief for my uncle. So the fact that I can say that at all continues to give me chills. Alongside of that reality of just wanting people to watch the film, we're also running a robust impact campaign. We're about to go on a 10-city tour all around the United States of places where there's a lot of goodwill from conservatives and liberals alike, from religious individuals and secular individuals alike, to really end this thing and have meaningful dialogue, in particular in religious communities where people have to own their power to stop it on their own, since laws can't touch what they're doing, unfortunately. And then we're also working with incredible national partners that are working on the bans. So that, as we mentioned, includes the National Center for Lesbian Rights, Born Perfect campaign, the Tramper Project, GLAD, PFLAG, and then a host of other local organizations that are tackling this in a really robust and wonderful way. So that's what's coming in the next year. Please visit www.prairieawayfilm.com for resources. We have an incredible educational guide up there. It's full of so much more information that the film doesn't cover, that this conversation didn't cover, that you can bring to your schools, churches, local communities, to your local politicians, etc. So that's a little bit of a that's a bit of a sum up of all the things that are happening. But yeah, this is definitely
So
just the
you're
beginning.
not busy at all. You're just chilling, relaxing.
Well, yeah, thank you. And also let me say I have the most incredible team. So I am here representing the film, but there are many people that I work with on a daily basis. We have an amazing impact producer, a set of producers at a amazing production company that's queer and women led called Multitude Films. We've got a whole host of people making all the things I said happen, but thank you.
I'm thankful for Netflix for bringing this film to my attention, and Christine, as you know, this is a film that's, long overdue. We had Pray the Gay Away from ages ago, the Exodus International film that was out there, the documentary, but it's very dated, still topical, but this really brings us to 2021, right? And what we're dealing with. But it's so important to uplift those orgs, your team. You have an amazing team. Julie, what's next for you? Where are you going? When can you come to West Hollywood? And I can make sure we take you out. Same for you, Christine. But what's next?
Yes, can't wait. I'll keep continuing to do the advocacy work that I've been doing. I also feel like because as queer people, so much of our history does involve a lot of oppression. Our conversations are often so much about the trauma and oppression that we have faced and that we continue to face. We also bring such life and such beauty and color to the world. And I'm excited to spend some time really exploring the unique ways queer people are a gift to our communities, whether that's the church or our jobs or the local, theater company or softball team, whatever it is. Like, I just feel like, and especially exploring the possibilities for imagining new ways of love and belonging and doing family together. I think, I'll speak for myself. Like, when I came out, I just sort of thought like, oh, it's like I live a straight life except with a woman. And it's really been over the last, 5 or 6 years that I've been like, oh no, we get to just rewrite the script and imagine entirely new ways of belonging. And so I'm really excited to explore more about chosen family because I think that's how we heal. Since so many of us come from places where we weren't wanted, I want to explore the relationships where we're chosen and where we're truly wanted.
Beautiful. And I want to give a shout out to my chosen family, one of them who is watching. That's Ann Jeanette over there in Missouri. I'm sending you lots of love. You've always been chosen family to me, but we all have those chosen family, and especially people like my mentor, Marie Cartier, who got me into this world. But, chosen family is what makes us so special. So we're going to go to a couple of questions now from the audience. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Obviously, you can email arts@weho.org and we'll get those questions up. But the first one comes from Jake. So the current leadership in LGBTQ movement stated in the film that the new generation is taking their efforts online and to the streets and no more conferences, right? What do you think this shift in strategy will be more or less effective in building their movement, and who is really funding them? Because as we all know, that's where the game is met.
Should I go for it, Julie?
Go for it.
So, I'm not sure if it's more or less effective than the world of the ex-LGBTQ past, but in terms of the current world that we live in, especially during COVID and now in the wake of COVID, where part of all of our lives are all online, which was true even before COVID, but now I feel like our digital life is a part of all of our lives in a totally new way. I think that this strategy is extremely effective. And it's a way in which that intimacy of the way the ex-LGBTQ movement gets into people's personal lives in a day-to-day way, it's showing up on your phone via hashtags on Instagram, via TikTok. It's extremely accessible. And for vulnerable LGBTQ youth in communities where, as Julie points out, there might not be a single person that is willing to love and accept them exactly as they are. To find a community of LGBTQ Christians who are even willing to say the phrase LGBTQ can be incredibly enticing. But then, of course, within that world that you point out that's online, it's the same messages that to be LGBTQ in any way is a sickness and a sin. So it's very insidious that it's going in that direction, and very harmful. And then in terms of the dollars piece, I actually want to say, I spent many years working on this film, and I did a lot of research for the film. And overall, I do not think people get into this because of money. I think that people get into this because they genuinely think that they're doing the right thing, because they've internalized homophobia and transphobia. They mistake feelings of community, feelings of belonging for this little inkling that change is coming and around the corner. And many people sincerely believe a lie that they've changed and that others can change. And I think it's that sincerity and that belief that people are doing a good and right thing that fuels people. I know people that have taken out second mortgages on their house to keep their ministries going. It's the world. I do not think that the most damaging part of this world is the fact that there's someone over here funding it. I think the most damaging part is that we have a larger culture of homophobia and transphobia that's encouraging people to believe that change is an option at all, that it's a part of their experience at all, that being gay is a sickness or sin at all. So that was something we really want the film to communicate, and I think it does. It's a great question, but I just think sometimes people can get lost in a money conversation and miss how important it is to talk about the fact that people are doing this because they've internalized hatred and they're wielding it outwards.
Hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people. That's
Julie,
it.
do you want to comment on this question?
Yeah, I would just add that pretty much every church, if they don't have like a rainbow flag waving, if you don't know, like when you're, a whole block away that they're queer affirming, then they likely have a community for people struggling with same-sex attractions or gender identity. And it's part of like, they'll have a Celebrate Recovery program, and it's like people struggling with, drug addiction or alcoholism or recovering from abusive relationships. They go, and you're also the same-sex attracted support group. And so I think it's just important for people to know that this is happening in their local communities, unless otherwise stated. And that's just the go-to response. So I would say if you're in a community that isn't overtly affirming of queer people, then ask the leaders of the local programs that you're part of what they believe about the dignity of LGBTQ people and our love and relationships. And if they don't express like enthusiastic support, then take your money elsewhere and start building up those spaces and organizations that do enthusiastically welcome and support us.
Exactly. I'm really honored that we have Marie Cartier asking a question. I mentioned her name. Shout out to her. Buy her book, Baby You're My Religion. It's great about this topic, but brings up the information about keeping religion, even though we can find it to be hurtful in the end. So mentioning that, in the HBO show, sorry, Netflix, I had to mention it. We're here. The priest that was featured in that show was recently, turned away and relieved of his duties because he appeared on TV in support of LGBTQ people, particularly his own daughter. Religious communities can be terrorizing, to those who deflect, but they also can be really important and the backbone of so many of our social movements. If you are kicked out of your religion, and this is, is there a way to hold on to parts of it? Maybe do both of you hold on to parts of it? Or do we need to turn our backs on it? Whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I would say that the answer to that is going to differ from person to person, and each person knows exactly what's right for them, and they should listen to their gut, listen to their intuition, and follow that. I have a lot of friends who have been harmed by religion and found a different kind of religious community because they either want to be a part of changing the system or they find it to be life-giving. Then I have a lot of friends who do yoga and consider themselves connected to a broader spirituality through their own personal practices. And every single one of them are beautiful. And I think what's most important is you look at a community and you say, does this lead to healing or harm? And if it's leading to healing, then be a part of it. And if it's harming, then run as fast as you can.
Christine, anything? That was a brilliant answer. I mean, I don't know how to follow that one.
Beautiful.
right?
I got nothing to add.
And remember, religion is a powerful force for good and bad, and I think that's how we see it bring the people together in so many ways, and has formed new communities, as we have seen, that are openly religious. Michael has a question. I've never
Can I
met
say
anyone.
one more thing?
Oh, Julie.
Sorry, John. I want to say one more
Take it
thing because
over.
I'm around a lot of queer people who are like, look, religion is so harmful and toxic. It just needs to die. And so I don't know why you're doing the work you're doing that sort of perpetuates an irredeemable or unredeemable system. And I think it's just important for our community to realize religion is always going to be here. It's not going anywhere. And so if there are people like who are up for doing the work to try to change from within, I think like, let's support each other in like each of us living out our callings and running in our lanes. And that doesn't mean that we all need to be like, yay, religion, but it does mean like, we need people on the ground, like doing the work of trying to change all kinds of people from the communities that they come from. So.
And remember, there are people that work in both the inside and the outside. There's always those that want to reform and those that want to, radicalize. All forms of activism are great activism, in my opinion. So Michael asks, I've never met a person who was subjected to conversion therapy. He's curious how pervasive it is. Christine, Julie, do you want to talk about this?
It's very pervasive. And so again, we know in the US alone, nearly 700,000 people have gone through this. Another statistic is that nearly 1/3 of all LGBTQ people have gone through some form of conversion therapy. Here's my like honest response, having worked on this issue for a number of years now via the film. There's a lot of people don't call what they went through conversion therapy, because people on all sides of this issue misunderstand conversion therapy to be electric shock therapy in a basement in some horrible psychologist's office. And that has happened in the past. I hear that in very rare cases that continues into today, but the vast majority of conversion therapy looks like what Julie went through. Version of talk therapy, group therapy, a Bible study for LGBTQ people, where these kind of psychological beliefs get weaved in with spiritual beliefs, that being LGBTQ is a sickness and a sin. So like one of the most moving thing what's happened in the release of the film is hearing from folks going, oh my gosh, I didn't know I went through this. I did go through this and it was that bad. So I wonder if Michael has met anyone in his life where they might not have called it this, but they look back and go, yeah, I did actually have a handful of meetings with my pastor and that was horrible. Another thing that I haven't said out loud yet too is that far too many licensed therapists also are not giving trans folks gender affirming care. And I think that's another form of conversion therapy, honestly. Like I'd mentioned, folks who are licensed that are pulling from disproven old psychological beliefs, but our whole psychological, all of our psychological institutions, educationally speaking, in terms of licensing the bodies, need to get on board to understand that gender affirming care is care, and anything that's not that is harming trans folks, and non-binary folks. I think it's a lot about like definitions and mutual understandings, generally, that make it feel like this might be a niche thing. It's really not niche.
Julie, did you want to add anything?
Nope. Christine's on it.
God, we got brilliance here. We have brilliant answers. There was a question, about how even though from Holly that, someone went through conversion therapy, it didn't work the first time, and the second time they left and married a man and had a baby, and then finally left their husband and came out when their son turned 3. But now it's triggering for her in some ways because she has that community to deal with, but then the secular community also tells her, well, she's bisexual because she clearly married a man and had a child, but she's gay. How do we deal with even our communities, our lovely rainbow flag, pride throwing communities, telling us we're not good enough or believing us who we are? I mean, Julie, have you had to go through that?
I mean, I think that those of us who have experienced a lot of trauma, can often sort of respond and out of our own sort of trauma. And I think that I would just say, keep knocking on a few more doors, because by and large, I found that queer people to be the most accepting, welcoming, warm place in the whole world. And so I, like be willing to just kind of like understand that everyone's got a past and everyone's got some things they're working with, and don't internalize that as sort of a word about your value. Just know that's probably more about what they've been through, and then go find some other friends, because there's like loads of people out there who will love and support you.
Exactly. Okay, last question, and then we're going to wrap up. What's the one thing you would tell your younger self when dealing with this?
I think I would say you are absolutely beautiful, not in spite of the fact that you're queer, but because of it. And that you need to listen to your own internal voice in your gut, even if it goes against what the people in your community are saying, because that will steer you in the right direction. And you're going to find a lot of love in your future if you just kind of hold on tight for a couple more years.
Christine?
I think we have to end with Julie. I mean, how beautiful is that?
I mean, Julie, you just inspire me. Christine, you inspire me. This film brings me hope, and it brings me anger because I'm angry. I know people that have gone through this, but it brings me hope that I know that there are people like you two, plus so many more out there doing work to make sure people know that they're loved. And we're going to say that one more time. You are loved. We love you. I love you. If you need help or services, please go to the National Lesbian Rights Center. We love them. I love them. They follow me on Twitter. The Trevor Project, the LA LGBT Center. Come right here to the city of West Hollywood. Find me. Go to Christine. Go to Julie. Watch this film on Netflix. It's available now on Prayer Way. Tell your friends. But most importantly, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Julie, for giving us a little bit of your time today, and obviously granting us with your grace and everything that you said.
Thanks so much, John. You're a delight.
Thank you, John. This has been incredible.
Thanks so much. All right, everyone, stay safe and healthy. Get vaccinated, wash those hands, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, John.